Welcome to my first step ever. This is a space where we come across stories from all across the globe, all across the industries and various streams, various career paths, so that you, my friend, can understand that you can build your career, your life in any field that you want. Even so, create some only if only you have conviction and that you follow your path dearly and you do not give up. And most importantly, take those actions and little steps. So please join me in welcoming an esteemed guest speaker for today's episode. We will be digging deep into his first steps behind the scenes of what really made him who he is today and the amazing impact that he's creating with his work in the world today. So please join me in welcoming Emmanuel Anthony all the way from Australia. Hi Emmanuel, welcome on my first step ever.
Very much for having me.
I'm going to give a bit of a sneak peek to our listeners today about who you really are, what you really do, but we will together discover what really made you and to have the kind of mindset that you have at this point in time. So, I would like to share this that Emmanuel is a researcher, writer, teacher, inspirational speaker, facilitator, consultant who works on one and to assist many human beings globally to overcome mental disorders, common challenges, achieve their goals, and expand human awareness. Now, these are all very, very vital aspects for a individual to grow in life. Because once you have all these aspects very, very set, the foundation is strong, then you can excel in any field that you want. So, thank you so much, Emmanuel, for taking that job on and doing that so well. He also helps people to gain clarity on their mission and lead highly inspiring lives with all areas of life. Now, we have him here on the podcast. We will definitely be delving deep into how did he reach the space where he is so competent to help so many people in such varied and essential aspects of their life. And he has served thousands of clients over the past 11 years. His teachings have been shared online, radio, and television, through workshops and speaking engagements, and today on this podcast. So, Emmanuel, let's trace our steps back to your childhood when you were this little Emmanuel, and we would love to understand what was the surrounding that you grew up in and the mindset of people that you were growing along with.
I grew up in a small third world country called Rodriguez. It's right near Mauritius. And I came to Australia when I was 4. My father wanted to escape Rodriguez, and he knew a little bit about Australia. He'd seen a kind of little snippets about it, and he felt that that was like people going to America, I guess, the land of the free. And that would give him an opportunity to allow his children to have a much more high level of education than he felt that he had. So that's how my humble beginnings started. But when I came to Australia, I spoke fluent French, and at that particular point in time, everyone spoke English. It was a little bit more of a racist time in Australia as well. So my father being, dark black and my mum being white. My sister and I were kind of in between. We're more like a kind of caramel, but we can also go latte color when it's winter. And my brother's white. So for us, we didn't really know, I guess about racism until we went to school, because in our household, there was every color under the sun. But when I came to Australia, learning how to find my voice, how to speak, how to thrive within the dynamics that exist within a primary school, figuring out how to deal with being bullied and picked on and all of those things, there was a lot going on. That was what little Emmanuel was trying to figure out. He was just trying to figure out how to make friends, how to talk to other people. And that's kind of what's driven me to what I do today, interestingly enough, because I'm a professional speaker, but I didn't know how to speak. So I studied other people so I could figure out how to communicate. And until I could get my English to be up to standards, I would watch them from a physical standpoint. And I'd say, what are the cool kids doing? And then I'd just kind of put together the dots and say, I noticed that the cool kids, whether male or female, do these particular things. They speak in these particular ways. So I modeled a lot of their behavior to see how that would work. And then from there, I kind of gained this key appreciation for human behavior and taking a fine detail in the way in which I listen to people as well. And that works very well in consulting today too, because I'm there to listen to people, but hear the things that maybe they don't hear that they're saying, the hidden things that would help them. So a lot of my early journeys and struggles within life, as little Emmanuel, are the things that I later on seeked to gain power in, and they've really created the personality that I have today and the mission that I have.
As I understand, for a lot of kids who kind of migrate at that young age, even if it's within the country itself, it is very, very, very difficult to kind of, come to a new environment. And in your case, it was a new country. There were different belief systems. There were different ways people look at you. And as you mentioned, that racism was a bit at peak at that point in time. But one thing that this country sort of does really well is now, for instance, I would say that give you that space to have your own voice, to understand who you are, and to tell you that your voice matters. So I like to kind of touch upon something that you mentioned over here, that you are a speaker at this point in time, and a very fluent one who makes a lot of sense. But back then there was something very, very challenging for you, and you were observant, and that's how you started learning things. But I have a question over here. you know Doing things for the very first time, when you know that you will fumble, you know that you will go wrong, even if you observed. And to learn English, the only thing is that you learn any language, you have to start conversing in that language. That's the only basic thing that you do. Did you not fear that, if I start speaking in the broken English, if I have, what will the other person think? And if that did cross your mind, how did you overcome that?
I can't remember back then, but I can put it into a multitude of things that have occurred since then. The theory behind it is that we have no issues expressing ourselves authentically unless we place somebody on a pedestal and then we fear them judging us. It's all to do with perception. If you see somebody and you see them as equal to you, whether it's their financial status, the way that they look, so it could be their beauty, their mental fortitude, all of those things. You see somebody that's like a neighbor and you see them all the time and they're just like you have no issues communicating with that person. You communicate, just whether you stuff up or not, you feel that they're around the same level. But any time that you put somebody below you, you project your values onto them and you exaggerate yourself and minimize them. And complementary opposite to that, anytime that you put somebody on a pedestal, you minimize yourself within that. So the only people I had trouble communicating to were the people that I had placed on a pedestal as a younger kid. And some of those were due to their popularity, their beauty, their social empowerment, and all of those things. So it was really the fears that get in the way, and the fears are only our perceptions because you may have 6 or 7 other friends that just don't have the same fears. They could have other fears. So the major thing that I've learned in my life is how to manage my emotions and my perceptions of other people and to make them equal to me. And when I was younger, before I learned how to do that through the Demartini method, which is a method I specialize in today, I just struck it head on. And I knew that at times I would have challenges, but if I valued it enough, I just kept going at it and saying, well, I still have this mindset today, which is I may not know what I'm trying to learn when I'm trying to do like a really big goal. But if I don't take a small step today, I'm not going to be any closer tomorrow. So my thing has always been very tiny steps on a daily basis that are so easy to achieve. Like they're challenging, but you're going to achieve them that day. That you build a sense of confidence that day and you go pat yourself on the back and say, well done, I did that. And then the next day you take another small step and it's like running a marathon. You don't run the whole marathon in 1 second. The marathon gets done over a period of time and it's just one step after the other. And if you commit to each one, you're definitely going to get to the finish line. It might be running, it might be walking, but you're going to get there. So that's kind of been my attitude. I have a very simple attitude of what's the small action step that I'm doing today. And I like to look at that in all 7 areas of life. And then next thing you know, it's a month later, and you've done some profound things. And then a year later, you're not even the same person. And then a couple of years later, and people look at you as an expert. So those things mount up, and I think it comes down to taking that first step. But a lot of people, like myself, had the fear of failure. And the thing about failure, I've noticed, is if you keep going and you dedicate yourself to something, and it's high enough in your values, you're going to fail every step of the way. That's what's called learning. But if you have this unrealistic expectation that you're just going to get it perfect, then you're definitely going to beat yourself up. So I tell my clients all the time when we're working together, it's about moving forward, not perfection, but movement. That's what's more important to me. I'd rather see you move
That's great.
forward. Aim for perfection. It's a beautiful standard to aim for. So, for example, I'm obsessed with golf. I might attempt to have the perfect swing because there's a level of dedication that comes with that, and I'm going to be trying to control everything at the most, kind of technically sound way that I can. However, I'm looking for progress over perfection. So that's the thing that I'm understanding. If I'm progressing every single week, then I'm going to get closer to that perfection every single week than I was the week.
Can't agree more with you on that, Emmanuel. And on this podcast, we have always emphasized on this particular fact that taking actions is so important. And adding one more layer to that, as you said, taking small steps, small actions every day creates that momentum that actually makes things work for you in the long run. And when you take small steps, as you just mentioned, it also takes away the fear of big things that we have in mind, because a small step comes with small risk and but always a lot of learning, and progress over perfection is amazing. That is something that really helps a lot of people. So listeners, if you are here with us right now, I think that would help you wherever you're stuck in your life today. This small but very powerful tip that Emmanuel has shared, which has helped him in his life, can definitely help you see through the situation. So, Emmanuel, now that we know, that what your upbringing was, what sort of mindset you were surrounded with, what was really playing out for you then, we would love to understand what went behind the scenes for you from there, like your university time. What was happening around that time? And we would like to understand what were you learning from that situation that really started helping you build on that foundation that you kind of really propagate today.
Well, university was an interesting time because I studied industrial design and failed that beautifully. Then went to industrial design. Pardon me, from industrial, I went to graphic design and stretched that out because I was enjoying a little bit of partying and non-school stuff at the time. I think coming from a very strict childhood, all of a sudden, I realized that your parents weren't dropping you off at university and you had a little flexibility and freedom. And I definitely wanted to enjoy that. Also, my father was very highly religious, and I'm an atheist by heart. So that was the time that I really started to explore my belief systems and who I was, which I don't think is an uncommon thing for many people, regardless of where you are around the world. University can quite often be a stage of freedom and an age where you're disconnecting from your parents and figuring out who you are authentically and whether that aligns with or which aspects align with who they are and which parts that it's time to kind of transcend in that. So I've had some very interesting conversations with my father where I've told him the same thing and said, well, you came to a country and gave us a very high level of education. And I think he finished at year 9 and then started his entrepreneurial lifestyle, which he's been very successful financially with. But I said, if you left at year 9 and you came here and you wanted us to have a very drastically different education, then we were going to become drastically different people with different belief systems, because that's what happens in a very educated society. You transcend the beliefs of a third world country. University was really about experimentation. Young Emmanuel at that particular stage was living like he was in the 60s. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll for me. Just university, a little bit of learning, mainly out partying, experimenting, discovering life in Australia as well. For international listeners, it's a very multicultural place. So I was discovering so many different cultures and aspects of people and things like that. So I'd say that period was just soaking up as much as I possibly could and surrounding myself with a range of different people and just trying to figure out who is Emmanuel authentically and detaching from my parents to the biggest degree and learning about responsibility. I can't say I did everything now with my wisdom in a way that I was speaking to somebody on the golf course the other day and we were just joking and I said, only his generation is kind of like 2 generations behind mine. The guy I was talking to, he's an 80-year-old man on Fridays that happens to have the same tee time as me when I play golf.
Lovely.
In his generation, you would finish playing, it was rugby in his case, but I'm from Melbourne, it's usually football. They'd finish playing and then they would get absolutely wasted on the beers and drive home. And the police would pull them over drunk and it wasn't an issue. That was just part of everyday culture.
Wow.
2 generations later, if you think about doing that, you go, oh my goodness, that's the wildest thing ever. How could you drink for 2 hours straight nonstop at a pub? And then, even the police wouldn't have an issue with it. But that was kind of the way that they did things back then. But then we were talking about how, 2 generations later, they didn't have drug tests and people used to drive taking drugs all the time and the police couldn't detect it. So we've come a long way as a society, but he and I were really saying that some of the risks that we've taken as in our youth and a lot of those things that you learn a lot about later on in life, you look back and you go, we could have been in some very hairy situations. I ended up in jail with a lot of the teenage and late teenage risks that we took. But it's easy to say that as you get older. But I guess, for anybody watching that's young, one of the challenges, I've just had a newborn, is knowing that he's going to have to go through his own stage of trial and error in a lot of errors in areas to figure it out himself. Because I can tell him about all my wisdom, but my wisdom came from trial and error. So he has to figure it out himself.
It is very important that you do go out there and do your own experiments with life, with understanding yourself, because that is the journey that really builds one's character. It really makes you understand that what is right for you, what is not right for you, and who you really are. And it also makes you understand that, along with whatever you have learned in life, that life is never going to be that simple and that easy. It's you and your determination and your hard work, and also being consistent with what you want can really help you, turn things around. So, Emmanuel, we would love firstly, I like to kind of thank you for sharing that sort of an anecdote with your golf friend over there. It does make us understand that how long, how things have changed in the society, and it will keep changing that way. But unless if you try things on your own, if you experiment, you fail at it, you make your own mistakes, you really can't say that you have lived your own life and you've created your own story, So it's really interesting. So, Emmanuel, from there, how did your professional journey really start, of being the facilitator, the inspiring speaker that you are today, and the technique that you talk about, Demartini? If you want to kind of share with our listeners today, what is it all about?
So I'd say that in primary school, I had a challenge communicating. So that was verbal and expressing myself. I had a challenge physically standing up for myself. So I was bullied. There was particularly a guy called Sean Myers that at the time scared the hell out of me. I was going to say scared the out of me, but I don't know if you guys, if that's a swear word on this
Feel free
podcast.
to. We
So
must.
yeah, in Australia, you can just say that scared the shit out of me, and it's not a swear word. But in America, that's a swear word. So it's just, I think we're a little more relaxed here. But
Yeah.
so I had a expression challenge. I mentally felt challenged that I was slightly weaker and slower than the other kids. Not that in terms of like I had any kind of mental retardation or something, but just when you're trying to figure out French to English and you're thinking in French and then you're learning, because I found that a lot of people that speak a language, they think in that language too.
Yes.
So and that's a whole different mindset. Luckily, I was only 4, so I was still quite young, and I hadn't kind of was set in my ways, so I could change. But that kind of really set forth the person that I was becoming. So then I had a real value for, because your voids create your values. A subject I teach by Dr. John Demartini called the values, and your values are created by your voids, and that's what you perceive to be most missing. So because I perceived that social was most missing, I went and spoke to everybody I could to try and be friends with everybody. Well, by the time I got to high school, I went from being a little bit of kind of the middle area, not really a loser, not really a winner, somewhere in the middle, and semi-picked on to my cousin was one of the most popular guys in school. So that was a really weird mix for me, because I went from there to all of a sudden I came in and he said he was in year 11 there's a year 12 that we kind of get to in my school. And he said, if anybody messes with you, you've got the whole school behind you. And I met everybody. And I spent more time in a year 7 and year 8 hanging out with the year 11s and year 12s. So nobody messed with me all of a sudden. I wasn't going to get bullied because the guys that do the bullying were my friends. But that was a weird mix for me, because when it happened, I felt like the little Emmanuel from primary school was still there all the way to year 12, and I could understand people. But at the same time, I think the first time I really realized it, I was walking down the hallway in year 7, and it's my first year, and 3 people walked up to me in like a 5-meter span and introduced themselves. They shook their hands and they said, "Oh, my name's blah, blah, blah. You're E-Man, and I know you. E-Man's my nickname." I said, "Why?" I'm thinking like the old unpopular kid. And I said, "Why would somebody shake my hand? I'm not a president walking down for an election or something that people are going to shake their hands." And then it kind of clicked to me, and I said, "Hold on. If you were unpopular in primary school, this is probably a great time to change the narrative. So I'm guessing that these people wanted to know me by association because then that puts them into the popular group. But I thought I'm in, like, it kind of just hit me. I'm that person now. So that was very intriguing. And it kind of happened too quickly. So therefore, I still had a connection to people, but at the same time, I wanted to embrace popularity. So I just stayed friends with everybody. Where a lot of people at my school had their own different groups. I had certain groups, but I bounced everywhere because I just kind of had a resonation for everybody, which worked really cool. So I built that popularity by the time I got to year 12. That was something that it was just part of my life. By the time I left year 12, I ended up doing doors at nightclubs and some very high end nightclubs that, they knocked back about 60, 70% of their clientele. And I was a doorman for some of those. So that was pretty cool. Then I also was picked on, so I developed this desire to work on my body. And at the age of 19, I started doing bodybuilding, and then that led to sports modeling. And I went from a very skinny kid that was maybe, I think it was 59 kilos at the age of 18, which is tiny. I think a lot of women would be that weight, and they'd be considered underweight, to 100 kilos bulking off season and 69 kilos. I think it was about 65 to 69 and about 6% body fat for my model shoots. And so now I'm doing the door, and I've got the popularity, and I'm not getting bullied because I've got the popularity and I've got the body for it. So I kind of felt I mastered those two areas. I felt I had a lot of challenges with women because I was scared of getting rejected. But then when I started doing the door at popular nightclubs, women flirt with you. And when you're a sports model, women flirt with you. So all of a sudden,
Good
I
on you.
didn't necessarily need to make as much effort at that period of my life. It was more about learning how to the dynamic of women, because just because a lot of women are interested in flirting with you, it's probably every guy's dream. But then later on, you realize that the more women in your life, the more challenges you have. It's the same with the more men in your life as well. You put a whole bunch of beautiful men in your life. Now you've got maybe 3 times the challenges if there's 3 beautiful men. It's not just, all rainbows, sunshine. So as I'm mastering these areas, the mental area still hasn't kicked in yet. And I'm having a lot of challenges with my father, and I'm going to celebrity events and a lot of interesting things. And I'm realizing that I'm hanging around in the spotlight, and I was on television as well for a few bits and pieces. And I'm in a lot of things where there's a spotlight, but I've got something psychologically that I wouldn't want to snap in public in reference to those. And I should really figure out how to work on that. So I started attending workshops. I didn't have a lot of money, so anything that was free, Tony Robbins, Deepak Chopra. I started with anybody that I could. And eventually a friend invited me to go see a gentleman by the name of Dr. John Demartini. I
Mhm.
just accepted because he said he was an amazing speaker, and he thought I'd resonate, but I didn't realize that was the moment that would change my life. When I went and saw him speak, I remember the first thing I thought was, is anybody allowed to be this smart? This guy was talking about physiology, psychology, biology, and astronomy strung into one sentence. He would speak, and it was
Wow.
like drinking out of a fire hydrant. It would take you like 5 minutes to figure out what he just said. And I just remember just staring at him and just like gobsmacked, like, who is this man? Anyway, he said he was running a workshop, and I went there with a friend Bahia. He was who had invited me, but then he also invited another friend, George, who I met. And I was acting like, I was one of the boys. I actually had more money than I did, but they didn't know that. And I said, and George said, let's go attend this workshop. And I said, sure. I never attended one before because it was a couple of thousand. I didn't think I had the money. And George said, okay, beautiful. Let's attend the first one in Perth. And I'm in Melbourne thinking, I can't afford to go to Perth. I can barely afford this thing in general. I'm on a payment plan. I said, sure, why not? And in my head, I'm thinking, why are you doing this? And so now I've got committed to go to Perth. The flights there, it's all the way on the other side of Australia too. I think they're amongst the most expensive flights.
Yeah.
The accommodation for it, and this workshop. And I just said, you know what, let's do it. If it's valuable enough, I'll figure out a way. And I figured out a way. I got all of that done, and I'm
Love
in
that.
Perth. And usually at most workshops, when you get there, there's people ready to run in when they open the doors. And George and I went a little bit early, and as we got to the front, he said, I'm going to get some coffees. Do you want to go get our seats? I said, no problems. So I just waited at the front door because nobody was there. Everyone was kind of like a couple of meters away from the door with their backs to it, looking at each other. But then somebody opened the door, and I said, I'm not running to the front like one of those losers that runs at the front. And I start walking casually. As I look back, I get about a third of the way in. Nobody's even realized that the door's open. There's like 100 people outside. Man, this is the wildest thing ever. I get about halfway. I look back. Somebody looks at me. And now I start walking a little bit faster. So I didn't run, but I definitely walked a little bit faster. And I got the front row seats. Like, you couldn't be any closer to John unless you were on stage with him. John started off with 4 hours of theory explaining how the universe is connected from all the way from the smallest unit of energy to the ends of the universe, and put the whole science together. And then we spent the rest of that Saturday learning the Demartini method, which teaches you how to break through any emotion that you have for a person forever. And we broke through. It's funny because there's over 100 people in this workshop, and I'm learning it. And yes, there's a facilitator, which is what I'm specializing in today, but I wasn't at the time, helping maybe 10 people on that table. But really, it's not a one-on-one experience because that's what's necessary for that workshop. But I still broke through 26 years worth of emotional baggage towards my father. And when I was done, I just had this state of just tears. And as I looked at John on stage, it hit me after the final breakthrough that this is what I was meant to do with my life. I was meant to serve people. And as I reflected back on my life, it was this euphoric moment. Everything went soft around me. It was absolutely amazing. And I remember thinking, no matter what's happened in my life, every single time that friends have had challenges, most other people are trying to avoid those people like the plague and going, oh, they're just very sad and depressing to be around. I was trying to solve those problems and running towards them. So it came clearly evident that I'd already been doing that for a majority of my life. I just never given myself permission. And and I'd studied graphic design, but the truth was, before I started work, I'd look for a whole bunch of YouTube clips around inspirational stuff to watch. During my work, I was more interested in what I was listening to. And in my breaks, I'd go for a walk or do some exercise and listen to that. That's all I was surrounding myself by. I just hadn't figured out how to get into the field. So I got home after that workshop, and I don't know why, it was very dark in my room. I guess I was reflecting about it kind of in a, you could say, yoga style position, legs crossed on the bed. And as I was thinking, I said, I've just taken the time to complete this process called the Values Determination by Dr. John Demartini, 13 questions that evaluates your life to see what's truly most valuable and meaningful to you. And what came to my conscious was that 80% of my answers were to do with personal development. And although I was a graphic designer with a business and I had staff members that I'd hired, that didn't come up once on my test. Even for what do you spend most of your time doing, there was more time involved in other things
Incredible.
than there was in that. So when I realized that, I said, well, what are the steps from here? Do I continue doing that? And I imagined myself in 50 years and I was just drained energetically from doing something that wasn't inspiring to me. Then I envisioned myself on stage speaking like I'd just seen Dr. John Demartini, and I just broke down in tears. And the words came to my mind and said, I would much rather die attempting to stand up than live on my knees. And from that moment, I said, I don't know what it's going to take, but I just want to find out what that first little step is. And then I just want to do that every single day. And that's how it's interesting. That's kind of what your podcast is about. But that in that moment, that was all that I was interested in. I said, I'm going to get there, but I don't know how to get there. I can hold on to that vision. I just don't know all of the steps to get there. This isn't like a high school university degree that's easily mappable. And there aren't people that I can access that are going to get me there easy. I'm going to have to create some of this own pathway myself. But that little step, let's find out, and then let's set the next month, and then the next year, and I'll have the steps, but I just want to see the next couple, and then I just want to be focused 100% on those, and I'll be doing that since that day. I've got a much more advanced plan. I've got a team. I've got staff members that do a lot of the other stuff for me that's delegated, but for me, it's just what's my next step, and let me do that.
It's very beautiful. I think the way that you have shared your story from bits by bits, I would say, we can see how taking small steps, and also during that journey, sometimes you have to make the brave call that you had taken back then, knowing that, this might not be something that might financially suit me, but then you're like, if it's that worth it, then I'll make it work. That is an attitude that really gets people really far in their life, that if you want to reach somewhere and you really do not know the entire journey which you've just mentioned, you need to keep taking small steps, and then you have to say, we will figure it out along the way if it really means that much. And actually, when you start taking those little steps, you'll realize that some things start working for you. It always starts working for you, because if it has to happen, it will start working for you in many ways, because then our focus actually goes to the aspects that let me see how can I make it work. And that's when you kind of keep looking at things that you were not looking at before that. So thank you so much, Emmanuel, for sharing your journey of how did you really break through, and what was those amazing questions that made you help you realize that what you really want to do. And I'm so happy that we today we can hear that you were able to do that for yourself. And for all our listeners out there, we are not kind of in that position to be there and listen to a lot of things that the facilitator, the speaker kind of told you. But if you want to leave our listeners with three questions that can help them evaluate things in their life, what would be those three questions, Emmanuel?
Well, my mentor, Dr. John Demartini, is known for saying that the quality of your life comes down to the quality of the questions that you ask yourself. And most people are asking questions that lead to polarization, meaning they see something as a negative and they're asking more questions about how it can be more negative. But anytime you exaggerate the negative or the positive, things occupy time and space in your mind. It's what we call brain noise. That's why if you're really angry at somebody, you can't get them out. And if you're really infatuated with a partner, you can't get them out of your mind. So both of those stick. And it's wiser to have a balanced perception because there's nothing that's all negative or all positive. It always has two sides. So one of the greatest questions that I like to ask myself, regardless of what's happening in my life, is how does this serve me? And in asking that, if you think you're going for a very challenging circumstance, in a day, a week, a month, or a year, you may not even remember that. And it's part of building a resilience, and it's on the way, not in the way. So that's one of the first questions. How does it serve me? Um, and our secondary great question you can ask is, how does what I'm doing provide value for others? You increase your worth when you realize that you actually already have a lot of the abilities that you may project onto other people and put them on a pedestal for. Uh, just recently this year, I've had a lot of clients that came to me and said, I've been offered this new job position. I don't think I'm the right candidate. And I'd have to stop them and say that if somebody's offered it to you, they already see that you are. So if they see more in your vision than you, then you're gonna not get very far. You've got to have a vision that's far beyond theirs. So we'll take the job qualifications, and then we'll take all of the criteria within there, leadership skills, etc. And because every human being has every human trait and anti-trait, and it's not a question of whether we have it, just the expression of it. And there's a column in the
Lovely.
Demartini method that makes you look for that. It's column 2 and column number 9. But I then get them to own that. And I say during every decade of their life, 0 to 10, where did you own leadership? And all the qualities, I get them to do that, all the human traits, actions, or inaction. And I get them to do 100 examples there, then 10 to 20, 20 to 30, to whatever age they are. By the time they're done, sometimes people do 500 examples and they're laughing and they say, I can't believe I perceived that I didn't have that. I can actually see that I've exemplified in that my whole life. I exemplified in the areas that were highest in my values. And if something was lower in my values, I didn't go to leadership because I had no interest in it. And then they realize I already have that inside of them. So the minute that they start to see where their value is, then they start to ask for that as well. So self-worth is linked to worthiness and what you actually end up gaining financially, which opens up your options. And then the last question, if I had to say one, I think the first two are really great, but how is this in the way, not on the way? Could be another expression. It could be similar to one of the other ones, but if you perceive that there are mistakes, I don't see any mistakes, whether it's a war or anything else. In my studies, the mathematics is the language of the universe, and every single time that we study an ology or a discipline, um, true science is where we study it and find the mathematical algorithms that are underlying that particular area, and then we understand it. And pseudoscience is where we project an idea onto the universe and then expect it to live within that. So an example of that is people that say positive thinking or positive vibes only. I said, no, you're projecting a perception due to your addiction of what you call positivity. But in every area of your life, you have both positive and negative energy. You have good and bad, pros and cons, difficulties, and things that are at ease. And if you can't be resilient to both and you're addicted to one, you're always going to be bipolar. So you get addicted to the positive, and then what you label as negative keeps happening. Now you beat yourself up, and then you go from all negative to all positive, all negative to all positive. But it's not all or none. It's actually both at the same time. So true resilience can only occur when you're actually embracing both. So a person that takes whatever's coming their way and says, how's this on the way, not in the way? And answers that question over 100 times, especially if they look in all 7 areas of life, which is an exercise that I give my clients in physical, financial, mental, spiritual, social, vocation, and family. They'll start to realize that their original perception had a bias that exaggerated the positive and avoided the negative. But if they actually start to increase some of the benefits of the negatives, they'll realize actually this thing is really helping me to grow and evolve, and this is part of the journey. And then they'll realize that when these challenges happen again in the future, these are actually part of the process, and I can thrive within those challenging circumstances. And when you can do that, then that's when you become truly unstoppable.
Given us the three questions, and you've also gone ahead and explained the meaning of that in depth, so that every one of us, each one of us who is listening to this today, understands that how do we really utilize this. And these are very deep conversations and deep thoughts that one needs to kind of really sit with themselves and work on. So thank you so much, Emmanuel, for going that extra length and giving us that tips and the words of the wisdom to kind of really sit with our own selves. And I think it's coming at really good time, that we can sit and ask those questions, evaluate, and get the better version of ourselves out there and be really true to who we are. And I think one would always fear for a lot of things, but doing it is more important. So it might be always there, the fear might be always there, but doing it along with that would really, really help us kind of, start diminishing the effect of the fear by 1% each time. So thank you so much, Emmanuel, for being on my first step ever, for taking us through your amazing journey and your breakthrough journey, and also sharing that with our listeners today, impacting so many people listening to us. So I always request our guest speakers that please leave our listeners with a quote or a saying that you really resonate with.
I'd say live to love and love to live.
Lovely. That is such a beautiful saying, I would say, and a very positive note to end this episode on. So thank you so much, Emmanuel, for being on my first step ever. And my listeners, if you've enjoyed listening to what Emmanuel has just shared, which I am sure you have, I will leave a link on all about Emmanuel and his work in the show notes. So do read that and follow him if you would love to. And as I always say, start believing in yourself and keep believing in yourself. Thank you.